Good afternoon. It's 5 o'clock in London, England, on Tuesday, May the 11th. Welcome to this week's What Comes Next Live. My guest today is Debbie Forster, who from Tech Talent Charter. And pretty much everything she's working on is really current and top of mind for many. So this is a platform for her to tell us what's now and what comes next for her, and also what can we all be doing more of? How can we lead differently? So I'm really excited to be in conversation, I'd say, but mostly listen to Debbie. And it's a pleasure to see you, Debbie.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today, Tom.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, and then really the floor is yours.
Thanks. So as soon as I start talking, people start getting a bit puzzled by the accent. So I'll put that one to bed very quickly. I have lived in the UK for 30 years, but I'm originally from the US. So the way I describe it is my American family think I sound a little bit British. The British think I sound a little bit Canadian, and the Canadians shake their head and walk away. But I have been here for 30 years. Originally, I'm one of those people who accidentally fell into tech. Started through education, was a teacher, then a head teacher, but very much around skills, enabling people in tech. Came through a social enterprise, a not-for-profit with young people in tech. We had great success with our diversity, working with our young people. 50% of our students were girls, which is not a stat that you have involved in tech. So I found myself then really pulled into this arena of inclusion, diversity within the tech sector. And that really brought me to be part of the Tech Talent Charter.
And a little of what's Tech Talent Charter all about?
So the Tech Talent Charter is a not-for-profit organization, and I describe it as we're leading a movement. This is about addressing inequality in the UK tech sector and driving inclusion diversity at scale. And it's practical and it's measurable. We started this because back in 2015, 2016, someone called Sinead, who wrote our charter, gathered some of us together. And I was amongst that group. And I said, I just can't go to another roundtable event on why there's no women in tech. We've got to do something. And I'm really tired of watching everybody reinvent the wheel. What can we do to get people to share what works and what doesn't work, to share data so we can measure it, and let's do something. And that really started the journey for the Tech Talent Charter.
So what's happening? I mean, obviously, I'm saying this for the audience. You and I have talked before. What's happening? What is happening that is moving the needle?
I think there's some really exciting things. And, the mantra I always go back to is Winston Churchill has that quote of never waste a good crisis. So if you think back to 2017, which is when I stepped forward as CEO and said, let's really see what we can do with this. At the time, we had 17 companies. And we decided, because this was about inclusion as a whole, but we needed to start with a tight focus. And so we started on the issue of gender. And if you think for 2017 was the year of Weinstein, Me Too, and tech had to sit up and realize that it didn't have the diversity, it didn't have the inclusion, it didn't have gender right. And their companies, industry as a whole, realized that there are benefits for getting it right, and there's a cost for getting it wrong. And this is really exciting. When we think about inclusion and diversity, the debate has moved now. This is no longer just about social justice, which is important, but that's rarely what makes things get done in business. Right. What's happened because of Pathfinders is that companies are starting to be able to show in real demonstrable facts and figures, bottom line figures, that getting inclusion and diversity right impacts the bottom line in a positive way. It increases a company's ability to move into new sectors. It increases their resilience. And so that began driving us. So within that first year of 2017, we went from 100 signatories to 100 signatories. And this is not just tech companies. I think the thing that's important to realize is this is any company that needs tech talent. So yes, we have Salesforce and Microsoft and Cisco, but we also have Lloyd's Bank. We have Sky TV, we have Cancer Research UK, Domino's Pizza, and Unilever. We have SMEs and startups. This is every company who needs this talent. If you roll forward a few years, it's been exciting to watch the debate, the discussion, the action continue to evolve. So early days, it was diversity. We got to get diversity, but that always runs the risk of tick boxing. And you had that panic of companies of, quick, I need diversity. I called it the takeaway window approach. I need 3 women, 2 Black people, a disability, somebody with disability and neurodiversity, and a bag of chips to go. By 2 years into the discussion, people were starting to realize you need to talk about inclusion first. It's about creating the culture that makes people want to join and to stay and feel that they can contribute. And to be able to say that this is inclusion for all, that this isn't just about getting white, middle class, able, cis women into tech. This is about thinking about all of those lenses. If we go forward another 2 years, now we have companies who are talking about equity. They're talking about equality of opportunity for all. It's about building that sense where people aren't just welcome into the room with their diversity, but they feel they have a voice and that voice matters and that they can advance and grow and shape what's happening in the space. So we've grown now, we're over 600 signatories. We are companies, it is free to join, but companies every year have to give us data or we kick them out. And the great thing is they continue to grow. And we've been able to move from just requiring gender data to get people to be willing to share data on ethnicity. We have companies who are now willing to share what works and doesn't work. So we have an open playbook. It's no longer a trade secret. Companies can tell us what they're doing on apprenticeships or retraining or Black allyship. A company can learn from someone else how to improve their recruitment, their retention, their retraining schemes. And there's genuine collaboration. There's companies that are moving out from behind the brand window to collaborate because the problem's so big, because this has to be sector-wide to make this different. Companies are beginning to operate in a different way to really move the dial on this here in the UK.
But the first thing to reflect on is that it's the name of the organization. It does what it says in the tin. It's a charter to which people sign up to commit to it. And when we spoke before, I was particularly taken with the fact that you kick people out if they don't report their data.
Everybody hates me in September. Everybody hates me in September.
Right. So they're going, where are your numbers? Where's your data? And there is that old adage that we are what we measure.
Exactly. So, and what's measured gets done.
What's measured gets done.
And I think in each year, the first year was the hardest. It was a real, when you fought hard to get 100 signatories, to suddenly look and say, and we're going to kick 15 of them out. That feels scary. But in doing that, we realized how it increased our credibility. It increased the trust. So each year, between 10 and 15% of companies are removed. And we make no apologies, because when we dig into the why, it shows that they hadn't really embedded some of those key things. So when companies join us, we're saying that they have to have people, plan, practice, and data. By people, you've got a senior signatory. This is buy-in at that top table to make sure this goes all the way through and removes the barriers, that there's a plan. This isn't something that you fix in Q3. I hate this approach sometimes companies have of, inclusion and diversity is like a vaccine. We're going to do it in Q3 and then we're done. This is something that has to be boiled in all the way through. The practice and the data. So when companies haven't submitted data, it invariably means they didn't have senior buy-in. Top table wasn't comfortable with that. They hadn't planned. They forgot to do it. They didn't build it into their working. Or they're not comfortable on that collaboration piece. It's too scary to share the data. In which case, I wish them well, kick them out, and say that they'll be welcome to rejoin in a year, but they'll have to demonstrate how they are going to share that data with us.
So for roughly 2017, so 4 years ago, 17 signatories, up to 100, up to 600. If I'm challenging you, it will be to say, I'm not seeing the change in the world, right? What I'm seeing is, particularly in Silicon Valley, it's all bro culture. It's
Yeah.
It's, a certain really well-known fast-growing fintech is known for having a fairly toxic bro culture in London, right? Doesn't begin with R by any chance, but anyway. And they may or may not be a signatory, but if they are, they have to be open and collaborate and report the data. So in 4 years, if people are reporting data, if they're seeing that it actually works and drives commercial, because yes, people have to be doing it for societal reasons. And this sort of bridging piece is, does it make you more money? Or does it at least not cost you anything? And does it have long-term benefits? We can argue till we're blue in the face, the obvious point that diversity reduces risk. Diverse thinking reduces risk. And, you and I could talk about that. And most of the sort of people who will listen to this later will already be tuned into that, right? That's the kind of audience. What kind of stats or data could you share in generality that show that the people who've been doing it for 2, 3, 4 years, that they're actually seeing tangible commercial benefits?
So I would say, in terms of, if you look, there's a number of studies that have been done, not by us. So there are some great McKinsey reports, Accenture reports, looking at the benefits on the bottom line. So the making the business case on why it matters, the positive impact, is the easy thing to do. All right. What we've been trying to look at, and I'd love to be able to say to you, Tom, in the last 3 years, we've seen an improvement of 26%. We know that would be rubbish. If I said that to you, you should be doing an investigative piece on what am I playing with on my data.
Right.
What we do know is that our signatories are, depending on which of the markers you use, whether you're using the BCS data, et cetera, we are 6 to 9% ahead of the UK norm. All right. So the UK data on gender breakdown in tech, our members are better than the norm.
On demographic diversity.
On demographic diversity. Yeah. We also break that down. We're seeing some surges. So we track year on year on roles. I'm delighted, because people will sometimes come to me and say, yeah, but Debbie, that's UX, isn't it? It's not really. But we're actually seeing on the computer engineering role that we've had a surge this year in the 2017. And I encourage companies to look at our annual report. But I think the thing to remember is, we're going on a model. Our change model is, we equip and we engage and we connect those who get it. That by creating that competitive edge and equipping those companies, they will attract better data, because we're also seeing some great stats. And we know that the millennials, we know that Gen Z are looking for companies that are more active on the social agendas. We know that it's better for retention and recruitment in that piece, as well as the bottom line. And so I make no apologies. The Tech Talent Charter, I don't apologize for preaching to the choir. I work with the choir because they're determined to be the best damn singers in the room, and they're going to attract the best singers in the room to come to that. And so I think the data for us isn't just that we report the headline figures. We give, because I always talk about, I'm not the carrot, I'm not the stick, I'm not the police, I'm the toolkit. So one of the things that comes out of the report is, we give the members then benchmarking tools, so they can sit down internally to understand where they're ahead or behind the game, measuring against companies in their own sector, in their size. And we're increasingly, as our numbers grow, looking at geographically. So this is where companies can understand, because a lot of the things is, well, what can we possibly do? It's like this for everyone. We can show the data where companies can break through that complacency of saying, actually, we do have companies that are breaking through. You are in the bottom quartile here. And then our events are about companies then talking about actually how they did it. So when we did our festival, we had the Unilevers of the world standing up and talking about, and this is how we set and exceeded our targets on gender. This is what we're doing on ethnicity. It's Bank of England declaring where they are on the journey, which is much earlier, but the targets they're saying. So it's companies being really willing to grapple with the how, not just the shiny numbers.
Something you said about equipping and engaging those who get it. It takes me back to my late mentor, Ed Percival, used to do the most powerful training course I've ever been on, and it was called, basically beyond presentation skills. So it was people who already know how to present and speak. And one of the things that people get taught in basic presentation skills when they're speaking to a room, and you might remember this if you did it years ago, was to find the cold spots in the room, the people with their arms folded, and do mirroring like I'm doing with you on video right now, and use all kinds of tricks to warm them up. And Ed used to say, well, has anybody heard of thermodynamics? Everybody goes, yeah, meaning don't really know at all.
Heard of, don't know anything else beyond that. Yeah.
I know what the word, I know that there is a word called that. It's something to do with science. And what he said was, okay, it's a lot easier to heat up something that's already warm than to try to heat up something that's frozen. All right, it takes less energy. So he used to very much recommend and practice heat up the hot spots.
Exactly. And and again, for business, we're not spending the time chasing the unconverted. It's moving beyond. And I build on that further, because one of the other interesting things that came up here is, remember I said that I'm B2B, and by and large, I will get my senior signatory. So I get the top table. But what we found interesting this year, talking about warm spots, was, as well as doing our annual data, surveying our companies who get it, we did a wider survey that worked with some partners of ours called a test, and it went out to middle leaders in tech, and they were not our signatory. So this is the wider group. If you talk about warm spots in the room, what was really interesting of those tech employees and who were middle leaders, 73% of them said they approve of their company's D&I efforts. So again, talking about your warm spots, talking about where things are interesting. And, and 80% of the respondents said that they strongly agreed that our initiatives are needed to improve gender diversity and ethnic diversity within tech. So we have these warm spots. We have to understand where it gets cold and where we have to do it. Where we wanted to hear then is, to me, the interesting piece is 40% said they can work. There's the exciting group to work on. You want to equip of your middle leaders, your 73s and 80s, but where there's this uncertainty, when it actually talks about what it's doing, it's then that engagement. So a lot of what we're talking about this year is, as well as gathering data, how are you having those conversations? How are you engaging those people? And it is just what you were saying. It is the mirroring. It is going through, because we have to engage everyone in the room. But we do that by equipping the warmest and trying to warm up the lukewarm.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. So you've gone from 17 to 100 to 600. What's next?
So next is deeper engagement. So I'm not stopping recruiting. I want to keep growing our numbers. But for me, what is making sure that we're really digging in deeper? So our annual report, as I said, we've taken the bold move. It scares some of our partners, but mandatory has only ever been gender, and last year ethnicity was optional. We know that that is another piece of the puzzle. So this year we're upping the requirements in terms of our report. We're building in opportunities for companies to be able to analyze their data more fully. We're looking at creating more opportunities for those discussions. So that's virtual. The great thing that did come through in terms of COVID was the potential in using virtual to engage everyone. And it gives us more time to be able to have deeper conversations with more of our members. So as well as our sort of public events, talking about sharing problem solving, we're also going to be doing some more closed roundtables, think tanks, trying to look at how do we go deeper, because I think we're now gender was actually the easiest point in the journey. It's not done, but that was the starting point. When we start looking at intersectionality, when we start looking at ethnicity, when we look at disability, we're really getting into where it's challenging, but we make the real difference. And so where you will see us leaning into is expanding our playbook on those other lenses, looking at those engagement, finding those ways of getting companies to connect, to really look at the deeper dive on how to move all those dials.
Interesting thought occurs to me is you've now got significant momentum and 600 signatories, and you've got that turnover, whereas the ones who don't get it, don't commit to the people, plan, and practice, then they don't do the data. Is this going to seem like maybe a weird thought? But when the phrase is inclusion, or as I tend to often call it, the feeling of belonging is one level above inclusion to me. But what about some exclusivity? All right. So the thing that goes back to me is I remember the business body in the Cayman Islands where I used to live used to do an annual salary survey because there was no good economic data because they have no income tax. So the government doesn't have any data on what people earn. So the Chamber of Commerce is the biggest business body, and the guy who's been the president there forever, Will, he had the idea of saying, we're going to do a salary survey, and only those who complete it get the report.
Yeah.
And it went from when he did it as like, we'll do a salary survey and we'll publish it. Hardly anybody there wasn't good data. The second he says only those who complete it fully get a full copy of the report and the data. All of a sudden, 90% of members completed it because they wanted to know and there was a commercial benefit because they wanted to know if I've got somebody in a generic role, what are they being paid in the market?
Yeah.
It was the only quality data. So when you start talking about think tanks and roundtables, there's obviously that balance. But if it's already a tribe that get it, and they've, like, let's say, if you have submitted your data 3 years running, right, you can be part of this group, and we'll commit resource to it, and we'll bring in outside facilitators and speakers, blah, 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 blah. So just wondering, because there is an element of which, it's creating more attraction into the club.
Absolutely. More. Yeah. And I think there's sort of the two tensions we're trying to balance, because there is the element of what we want to offer always free for all in an open source way. So actually bits of my playbook, etc., even if you're not a signatory, we can use. All right. You can have access to that. But we are starting to build, everyone can be a signatory if they give us data. Mm-hmm. Then there's going to be where other companies are giving us other input, whether it is sharing the data, whether it is sponsoring of what we do, and some of our partners, because we are starting to get companies who are willing to help make us sustainable financially, right, in order for the whole of the sector to get it for free. So basic signatory status, if you give me your data, you get it for free. But yes, there are going to be other opportunities for companies who are willing to help us financially to make it free for everyone.
Very, very cool. That's yeah.
And I think the other thing to look at as well is, to my knowledge, and maybe someone in your audience can tell me otherwise, what I'm hearing for a lot of my global companies is there's nobody quite doing this anywhere else. Mm-hmm. So we are looking at partnerships, and we are working with our global partners to understand we will remain UK focused, but it is trying to understand what does this mean in other regions. Now, I'm not looking for global expansion, because for inclusion to really work, it's got to be grounded in the culture in which it is. So the ways in which we have tackled things within the UK would not necessarily be the same for every European country, with something in Latin America, et cetera, et cetera. But I think this is about equipping and mobilizing the companies who are get it and are willing to do this. So we benefited here in the UK back in 2017 when gender pay reporting was mandatory. A government leaning forward to set a requirement. Now they've leaned back on that. We're going to keep pressing that they should be doing that. But how can we help companies keep pushing that equity piece, that social inclusion piece, the gender piece, all of those things, even when the governments themselves won't throw out that moral imperative? How can we create ways in which companies can work together to try and achieve what governments don't always lean forward to do?
True. And we could easily dive into a political conversation, because if you look at and I won't, but in the USA, despite the political environment up until January this year, people were still moving things forward on all of this. And so whatever the political environment is over here, if you think of it like ESG, all right, if we're focused on the space you're in, I put it that some investors, etc., are thinking, okay, well, all the gender and ethnic equality and equity, that's done. Let's focus on ESG stuff now, right? But
Yeah.
but they keep forgetting that in ESG is social and governance, which is about community and morality, and ethics, etc. So yeah, it will keep moving forwards. And I do remember really liking some advertising which talked about inclusion really well from HSBC, and I don't mind naming and shaming them. And then Vanda Wyporska from the Equality Trust immediately replied to me on Twitter, and she's been a guest on the show as well, and saying, have you seen their gender pay gap information? And they're bottom of the FTSE 100. At least they were then. I don't study it.
And they're working and they're leaning in on that. And I think
so data, I mean, data is, we are what we measure, right? Data is really powerful. So you've really got something there. And if I think you talk about the warm spots, if you've got open events and you've got leaders from companies going, this is what we've done, this is what we measured, here's our data, those people can be pushing up from one of the things that I've seen happen a lot is leadership comes in all directions. And if somebody in the middle goes back to their company and goes, we heard so-and-so from Unilever or Salesforce talking about this, are we signed up, right?
Exactly.
What would it take for us to sign up? And they push up from the inside because
absolutely.
It could be because of somebody's individual experience in life. And they go, look, I made it, but I'm not pulling up the drawbridge, a phrase now in fairly common parlance in the UK. I'm actually looking to build more bridges for people to cross.
Exactly. And I think that's what's powerful in terms of, our growth to 600. We've never paid for advertising. We've never gone out on big marketing campaigns to get companies in. Our most powerful, inbound route is through recommendations or people coming to our events. And it does start with an enthusiast who brings the company on board and brings them on that piece. So I think the power of the individual can never be underestimated, and then the power of companies to begin doing that, and positive peer pressure. And it is exactly what you said. We're very upfront in terms of equipping the willing within any company so that they can. And it is that idea of why we talk about the whole toolkit. So the report and the benchmarking tools breaks through the complacency and gives this sense of the art of the possible. And then the playbook gives you those roadmaps on how you can do that. And our events have, in our festival, day one was companies at all stages talking about how they got from A to B and being honest about, what C might be that's still really hard. Even Unilever, who I'd really put at the forefront on what they've done on gender, they don't talk about it as done. They would talk about they're still in the foothills. And when they think about the wider piece on inclusion, they're saying they're still at base camp, but they're taking their learning. And it was some genius and brave leadership in how they use data internally to drive the change, to peel back the excuses and bias and everything else. And I think it's important to realize that, because there was a vogue, again, 3 years ago, to say, well, all we really need to do, and I'm being oversimplistic, but some people were, well, we've done our unconscious bias training, so that's fixed now, right? So we're done. And it is looking and understanding about what has to happen in terms of data and accountabilities and transparency alongside the people management and the change management. And the two things have to come together. If you don't have them both, the Government Equalities Office here in the UK put out some really powerful and painful research and evidence on how just doing the people piece, just doing the unconscious bias training doesn't work.
No.
That it has to have the data, it has to have the accountability. But equally, while that will deliver to keep it really growth and accelerate it, you have to create that psychological safety. You have to look at the culture. You have to look at that softer, which is harder to do, side to bring it together to really drive that through.
Cool. I'm a big thought for me was you were talking about being a charity, financial sustainability through partners, and sponsorship is one thing. And what occurs to me, and I've mentioned before on this show, I haven't yet had the founder come on yet, But in terms of sustainability, there's a really cool app that I like called pawprint.eco. And the idea is it calculates your individual carbon footprint. Now, if you're looking to build a business with effectively a free app, the business model's not very easy. And getting one person at a time isn't very easy. But if it's about educating people around their impact on the planet, from everything they eat, their heating bills, etc., just go to a company that has 10,000 people and say, will you partner with us? All of a sudden, you've got 10,000 users.
Yeah.
And if that company is committed to that area of, societal concern, they either invent it themselves or they financially partner with people that can do it. So I guess if what you're doing does appear to, I've not come across, and I do a lot of work in the Americas, I've not come across anybody doing exactly what you're doing. And you do have to focus on tech, and you did start with gender. Very real issues. But a lot of the companies you listed in multinationals, a lot of them, particularly in tech, thinking about the big computer services companies, they'll probably go, yeah, we've already got our own stuff, thanks, because they're big enough. But there may be a piece for saying, well, okay, if you're supporting the industry, the small to mid-size, the companies that are less than 10 years old, tax is a horrible, and I come from the Cayman Islands, we don't have income tax. Tax is a horribly misnamed thing. It's about, contribution to society. Okay. So we say, okay, well, what if you, committed something towards this, right? What are you doing towards this? Well, we're doing this, we're in the foothills, we're at base camp, etc. And some of those bigger companies could be supporting other people in their industry. I know it takes a level of altruism, but it also takes a matter of signaling what they're doing.
Exactly. And this comes straight from my sales deck. So two things that I would say is,
which I've not seen, by the way.
So in terms of how we set up, there's two principles I went at, and because I've worked in not-for-profits for a while, and it was really important for me to first of all be really clear that in tech we talk about minimum viable product. In setting up the Tech Talent Charter, one of my working principles was we're going to be a minimum viable organization. We are going to keep ourselves as small, as focused as possible. And we're going to look for as many ways to take cost out of our model as we are to find revenue coming in. And in doing that, we will work with companies, some of whom do give us cash, and I'll talk about that in a second, but some of whom give us services, people in kind to make that happen. Then to talk about the companies who do sponsor us. I'm not a pearl and twin set sort of person. I'm not a, give it to us because we're such a good cause. We really look at the business value at the end. I mean, you're absolutely right. What I say to a lot of corporates is absolutely, you can wash your own face. But if you're really going to show that you're a thought leader, if you're a driver in the space, you want to demonstrate how you're doing this for the sector as a whole. And so when we talk about our Unilevers and our Lloyd's Bank, et cetera, who are working with us, they're sponsoring to make sure that we do have these hackathons to bring in the best practice that goes free out to everyone. They are sponsoring the national events that mean we can do that with free tickets for the room. And so this is our larger companies. It does help them. They do feel they are learning from it, but this is also part of their broader social mission that they know. And there's a business sense as well, because however great they get at fixing it for themselves, unless they change the size and shape of the talent pipeline, we're really finding over the same very limited resource.
Yeah.
The smart business thing is to go for big systemic change, system-wide change that changes the whole shape of the pipeline, and they all benefit it. And we get our corporates who are now getting that. Yeah, we're going to do this and we're going to work it together. And this time you get to hire them. But after they've worked for you for 5 years, they'll come work for me. It's about that moving away from, I used to talk about it, the old way of doing it, which was you're investing in a really, really shiny, expensive fishing rod, but then you're going to the same leaky barrel that everybody else is.
Yeah.
Get out there, change the whole damn site of the barrel, get to the lake. And you only do that if you get the companies. And so the companies are. So we have had government money, but we have had corporate partners who see the business value we deliver in being a sponsor and being a partner with us.
Cool. Well, it all sounds that one of the keys is being open and collaborative.
Yeah.
Conscious of the time, there's been a lot of very powerful stuff here. What closing message might you have for listeners?
Join us. Stop trying to reinvent the wheel. Get in. I would say, I can't imagine there's any of your listeners who do not need tech talent within their company.
Yeah.
And so if they're doing it, if they're in the UK, it's an easy win to join and be part of moving this forward. If you're outside the UK, that's fine. Look at our materials, look at what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
You can start your company, whatever the size, whatever the stage you're at. This is not about none of my signatories said they've crossed the finish line. This is a marathon, and you can get in and join that marathon and learn from everyone else. It's about connecting those dots.
Perfect. So join Tech Talent Charter. Don't try and reinvent the wheel. Thank you very much, Debbie.
Lovely.
Really appreciate it. Learned a lot.